Okay, so at the end of each lesson, usually there's kind of a more reflective task to do, get us to think back on what we've learned and how we're also going to apply it moving forwards into our own context. So which of these techniques do you already use or now want to use in when you are presenting grammar, and which are not important to you? And choose your answer, then click to see what other teachers thought. So Steve, I'm going to take your answers for this. A situation to provide a context is important because meaning can change in different contexts.
Yes, I already use this technique. And just to say, I'm teaching first year at university in Japan. So 18-year-olds who've been studying English for up to 10 years now. Again, my context is really important here, that I'm not in the elementary school or the junior high school where people normally get the grammar points explained, in a very detailed way. I'm trying to focus on fluency and trying to get them to actually use the language. So I wanted to say that just to contextualize my opinions.
All right. And if we look at the votes, you can see that a lot of people use this. This came from some experienced teachers, and sometimes, you've got newer teachers who want to use this technique because they might not have used it at all. Okay. The next one.
Demonstrations or pictures are optional because sometimes they're not necessary or even the best way to help students understand the meaning of a grammar point. What do you think, Phil?
Yeah, actually, I do tend to use demonstrations and pictures, but sometimes they might just be written, like the third person S on a verb, going from I go to you go, she goes, he goes. So I don't necessarily need a picture or demonstration because people can already know it depending on the level. But yeah, for me, I already use this when it's appropriate.
Yeah, and I don't use it. I used it a lot. I remember planning lessons and bringing all kinds of realia, menus and magazine pictures and all that kind of stuff. But I use it much less now. But I still demonstrate sometimes. But yeah. Okay.
Example sentences are very important, especially if you can get both student and teacher examples.
Absolutely. I already use this technique. I'm constantly listening, thinking about the students' lives, what's interesting for them, what's, it's part-time jobs for university students. In Japan, most high school students don't have a part-time job. So it's, again, understanding what your students are doing, what they're interested in, makes the connection easier.
Yeah, for many of our newer teachers, they might realize that, they don't use this as much as they'd like, so they might want to use this technique more, for example. Okay.
Yeah. Explanation of the rule is optional because for some or even many students, rules don't help them to use the new language. What do you think about that?
If I'm teaching university students, then usually they've had that explanation of the rule for several years throughout their secondary schooling. So it's less relevant to me, and I'll be looking to elicit those rules from the students if necessary and see what do they already understand or know. And with my youngest learners, then yes, they don't need to be able to explain grammatical rules because they're basically still in pre-kindy and so on. With my very high level learners who are kind of brushing up on some of their areas of grammatical weakness, and sometimes they like to go back or they ask me questions and I need to explain to them.
I would say I agree with all of that, and that I guess as you were talking, I was thinking back to this past year, and the times that I would explain a rule was almost always when I heard recurring mistakes in the students practicing. And so I'm, again, as a new teacher, I was hiding behind the desk or the podium.
Mhm.
As a veteran teacher, I'm almost in the audience, or, you know, around their desks as much as I can be now when
Mhm.
they're practicing. So I'm learning so much about what they can or cannot do. Then I'll go up to the board and review things.
Okay. Oops. Tables. Table showing different
Yeah,
forms, optional because it may be unnecessary or even confusing to students, but use it when it helps students to understand.
yeah, I just don't use them. I'm not a table guy. How about you?
Me, I'm very much a table guy. So when I was learning French, Japanese, German, whatever language, I found it useful to be able to kind of see the structure and be able to slot words in, see which are the fixed parts and which are the flexible elements. So I do
That's
use them, and you know, some students appreciate them more than others, but I think it's a good tool to be able to use in class, and not just as teachers, but for our students to be able to use if it helps them as well.
That's one of the things I love about you, is that we're so different, but you always know why you do what you do. Yeah, that's fun.
Okay. We touched on this a bit earlier. Translation is optional, and it can be a quick way to confirm meaning, especially in a monolingual class.
So, over 90% of my teaching experience has been in a monolingual class with Japanese only students.
Mhm.
And so it's very easy to use it. It's very quick. Um, had a veteran teacher tell me once, when I asked him about how much Japanese do you use in the classroom, and he said something like, the more I understand Japanese, the more I use it when necessary. And
Mm,
it's that, you know, it's very much a slippery slope, that I know some teachers who don't speak English in
mm,
their English classes. They
mm.
speak only Japanese.
Right.
And I have a big problem with that. So it's called a judicious, you know, it means that it's not just off the top of your head, it's with intent, that
Yes.
you choose when you use Japanese, or when you use translation. So
Yeah, and quite often, you know, students used to come to private language school. They would say that, you know, their teachers sometimes they came to language school to be able to speak English, because at school even their teachers couldn't necessarily speak English, or they wanted to be able to speak like a good English teacher that could speak English, that had been overseas, etc., or had learned
yeah,
very well within their own country.
yeah.
Um, okay, so yep, translation, judicious. It might be the key word here.
Hey, nice, nice, nice.
Repetition is a good idea because it helps students to gain confidence with pronunciation, rhythm, and intonation.
Sure, I do. Yeah, sure. And again, it's sort of with the less experience students have with the language, probably the more repetition I do, because repetition can give confidence. You know, it can be fun. You can play with it, with the rhythm and the, you know, yeah, it can be fun, but as a building tool, not as a final tool.
Yes, and I think, you know, a lot of teacher training programs teach this as technique. Please listen and repeat. Students listen and repeat. But I've also seen this done to death, where the whole practice stage is full of listen and repeats. And as students get to a higher level, they're kind of looking at the teacher, wondering, why are we doing all these listen and repeats and so forth. So
Yeah.
it's an important technique.
Hmm.
Think about, yes, who you're using it with, what stages of the lesson you're using it, and how much. And we do talk about this in a separate lesson on the course, as well as different types of listen and repeats, including the silent listen and repeat.
That's judicious again, which kind of connects with the word judging, like judging when you do things, and knowing why you're doing them. So
Absolutely.
I wanted to bring up that I had a big smile on my face at the beginning of this section, because you said, okay, so Shall we move on to the summary?
Okay. Students' own examples are very important because they'll likely remember their own examples better than examples from a textbook or teacher.
Sorry, are you? Oh, I didn't know we were on the last one. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I already
Students' own
used
examples.
I already used this technique, and I do this as I've taught longer and longer. Then I do this more and more throughout different aspects of the different stages of the lesson, and I'm always looking for opportunities to do this. Anything that can make it more.
This is how you remember students. You remember them by knowing something unique about their lives or their interests or their experiences. So the more you can build trust in the classroom to get them to tell you real stuff, the quicker you'll be a better teacher.
Definitely. And as well as building rapport between them and us, building rapport amongst themselves as they get to know each other is also key to that.
Nice.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.